I was 26 years old, standing in the break room of a dental office in Phoenix, Arizona, holding a gas station cupcake with a single candle I'd bought for myself. It was my birthday, and I was working a double shift because rent was due in 3 days and my bank account was sitting at exactly $47.16. I remember that number because I'd checked it obsessively that morning, hoping somehow the universe had deposited a birthday miracle overnight. That's when my phone buzzed. The text was from my dad. "We sold your car. Family comes first. Be grateful we raised you to understand sacrifice." I read it 3 times before my brain could process what I was seeing. My car. The 2018 Honda Civic I'd been making payments on for 2 years. The car I'd bought with my own credit, my own down payment, my own blood, sweat, and overtime hours at this soul-crushing job where I clean people's teeth for $9 an hour plus tips that barely covered my gas to get there. If you've ever felt that moment when the ground disappears beneath your feet, when reality tilts sideways and nothing makes sense anymore, then you know exactly what happened to my world in that sterile break room that smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. But here's the thing about betrayal. And if this story moves you, if you recognize that feeling of having your trust shattered by the people who should protect you most, hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning of a journey that will change how you see family, loyalty, and what it really means to fight back. The cupcake fell out of my hands. I watched it hit the linoleum floor, the single candle bouncing once before rolling under the vending machine. My phone was still buzzing with more texts, but I couldn't look at them yet. I couldn't breathe. My car wasn't just transportation. It was freedom. It was independence. It was the first thing I'd ever truly owned, the first monthly payment I'd made on time every single month for 24 months straight. It was my proof that I could adult, that I could be responsible, that I wasn't the screw-up my family had always made me feel like I was. And they'd sold it. I finally looked at the other messages. My mom. Your brother needed surgery money. We knew you'd understand. My sister Jenna. Don't be dramatic. It's just a car. My youngest brother Kyle. Sorry sis, but Carson really needed this. Carson. Of course it was about Carson. Carson was the golden child, 24 years old, and still living in my parents' basement, playing video games and dealing weed to high school kids while claiming he was figuring himself out. Carson, who'd never held a job longer than 3 weeks. Carson, who'd wrecked 4 cars and somehow always got bailed out by mom and dad. And now Carson needed surgery. What kind of surgery? The text didn't say. But apparently, it was the kind that required selling their daughter's legally owned vehicle to pay for it. I called my dad immediately. He picked up on the first ring like he'd been waiting. Before you say anything, his voice was already defensive. We put the title in our name when you moved out to help with the insurance. Technically, it was our car. Technically. That word hit me like a physical blow. Yes, they convinced me to transfer the title when I moved out at 24 because they said it would save me money on insurance if I stayed on their family plan. I was young, I trusted them, and saving $60 a month meant I could afford groceries and gas in the same week. Dad, I make the payments. I've made every single payment for 2 years. That's my car. And we appreciate everything you've contributed to the family vehicle, he said in that condescending tone he'd perfected when I was 15 and asking for lunch money. But Carson's appendix ruptured. He could have died, Maya. Family comes first. Maya. That's me. Maya Chin Rodriguez, because my mom is Chinese American and my dad is Mexican American, and I grew up being not quite enough of either culture to belong anywhere, but too much of both to disappear into the background. It's a specific kind of invisibility that shapes you in ways you don't realize until someone steals your car and calls it family loyalty. How much did you sell it for? I asked. That's not important. What's important is that your brother is alive. How much? $12,000. I had to sit down. My legs just gave out. $12,000. I still owed $8,000 on that car, which meant there was $4,000 left over. $4,000 that could have paid my rent for 4 months, could have gotten me through the slow season at the dental office, could have been the emergency fund I'd never been able to build because every spare dollar went to family dinners I couldn't afford to attend and birthday gifts for people who apparently saw me as a resource to be liquidated when convenient. Where's the extra 4,000, Dad? What extra? The surgery cost 15,000. We had to add to it. 15,000 for an appendix surgery. I knew enough about medical billing to know that was either completely untrue or Carson had gone to the most expensive private hospital in Arizona and demanded a suite. Dad, I need my car. I need it to get to work. I need it to live. You'll figure it out. You always do. You're resourceful. Resourceful. The family code word for, we're going to create a problem for you and expect you to solve it yourself while being grateful for the opportunity. I can't get to work without a car. Phoenix doesn't have public transportation to where I work. Take an Uber. Take an Uber to a $9 an hour job. 45 minutes each way. The math on that was simple. I'd be paying more for transportation than I'd earn in wages. Dad, this is insane. You can't just sell someone else's car. We can, and we did. Carson needed surgery, and we made a family decision. You'll understand when you have kids. When you have kids. Like I was some teenage sister instead of a 26-year-old woman who'd been financially independent since the day I graduated high school. Like I hadn't been contributing to family expenses since I was 16 and working at a grocery store to help pay for Carson's baseball equipment. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. That's when I realized something that would change everything. I wasn't angry yet. I was hurt, I was shocked, I was devastated. But I wasn't angry. The anger would come later. And when it did, it would change everything. But first, I had to figure out how to get home from work without a car. I had to figure out how to pay rent in 3 days. I had to figure out how to rebuild my entire life because my family had decided my independence was worth less than my brother's convenience. I walked back to the dental chair where Mrs. Patterson was waiting for her cleaning, and I did what I'd been trained to do my entire life. I smiled, I apologized for the delay, and I pretended everything was fine. Mrs. Patterson tipped me $5 that day. She said I seemed like I was having a rough time and wanted to help. $5 from a stranger showed me more kindness than my own family had. That night, sitting on the floor of my studio apartment eating ramen noodles and Googling bus schedules, I made a decision that would define the next 3 years of my life. I was going to get my car back. And I was going to make sure my family understood exactly what they'd done. I just didn't know yet how far I'd have to go to make that happen. The Phoenix public bus system, I discovered, was a cruel joke designed to test exactly how desperate you could become. My first morning commute without my car took 3 hours and 45 minutes. 3 different buses, 2 transfers, and a 20-minute walk in 102-degree heat while wearing scrubs and carrying a bag of dental tools. I arrived at work looking like I'd been through a car wash without the car. Maya, honey, you look terrible, said Dr. Morrison, the dentist who owned the practice. He was a kind man in his 60s who treated his staff better than most, but even his patients had limits. Is everything okay? I wanted to tell him. I wanted to explain that my family had stolen my car and I was now functionally homeless in a city built for vehicles. But what was I supposed to say? My parents sold my car to pay for my grown brother's medical bills and didn't think to mention it until after the fact. Instead, I smiled and said I was having transportation issues but working it out. But I wasn't working it out. I was drowning. That first week was a masterclass in humiliation. I had to ask coworkers for rides home, promising gas money I didn't have. I had to turn down shifts because I couldn't get there. I watched my hourly income disappear into Uber fees and bus passes while my rent deadline approached like a freight train. And my family? Radio silence. No follow-up calls asking if I was okay. No offers to help me figure out alternative transportation. No acknowledgement that they'd created a crisis in my life. It was like they'd solved their problem and assumed I'd magically solve mine. But here's what they didn't know about me, and if you've ever been underestimated by people who should know better, you'll appreciate this. I've always been a researcher. Even as a kid, when something didn't make sense, I dug until I found the truth. So I started digging. First, I called Mercy General Hospital, where Carson supposedly had his emergency appendectomy. I told them I was a sister, calling about billing questions for the surgery he'd had the week before. I don't show any recent admissions for a Carson Rodriguez in our system, the billing representative said. Are you sure about the dates? I tried Phoenix Baptist. Same answer. Banner University Medical Center. Nothing. St. Joseph's Hospital. Nothing. 4 major hospitals in Phoenix, and none of them had any record of my brother having surgery. I sat in my apartment that night, laptop open, diving deeper into the lie. If Carson hadn't had surgery, where had my car money gone? And why had my parents chosen such an easily disprovable story? That's when I remembered something. Carson had been posting on Instagram throughout the week I'd supposedly been too busy with his life-threatening medical emergency to let me know about it. I scrolled back through his posts. Tuesday, a video of him playing video games with friends, captioned All-Nighter Gang. Wednesday, photos from a bar downtown, clearly very drunk, captioned Hump Day Motivation. Thursday, more gaming content. Friday, a photo of a brand new iPhone, still in the box, captioned Treat Yourself Friday. Saturday, pictures from a pool party, shirtless and clearly in perfect health. Sunday, the day my car was sold, Carson had posted a photo from inside a car dealership, sitting in what looked like a brand new truck, giving a thumbs up to the camera. The caption read, New ride, who dis? I screenshot everything. Then I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. I know what you're thinking. A private investigator? On $9 an hour? But here's the thing about rock bottom. It clarifies your priorities real fast. I took the money I'd been saving for rent and paid a PI named Janet Flores $300 to spend one day finding out what really happened to my car. Janet called me that evening. Your instincts were right, she said. Your brother never had surgery. The car was sold to Mountain View Auto Sales for $12,000, just like your dad said. But here's the interesting part. The same day, your brother purchased a 2019 Ford F-150 from the same dealership for $11,800. He paid cash. The room started spinning. He bought a truck. With my car money. It gets better. I pulled some records. This is the second vehicle your parents have sold this year to help with family expenses. In March, they sold a motorcycle that belonged to your sister Jenna to pay for what they called home repairs. Jenna still thinks her bike was stolen. My sister Jenna lived in Seattle. She'd been devastated when her motorcycle disappeared from our parents' garage while she was visiting for spring break. She'd filed a police report. She'd lost sleep over it. Janet, are you telling me my parents are stealing vehicles from their children? I'm telling you that according to DMV records, your parents have transferred ownership of 3 vehicles from their children's names to their own in the past 18 months, and all 3 vehicles were subsequently sold within days of the transfers. 3 vehicles. Carson's new truck. What was the third one? The third vehicle was a 2017 Subaru originally registered to Kyle Rodriguez, your youngest brother, I assume. Sold in November of last year.
Kyle.
My baby brother, 22 years old, and working as a line cook in Tucson. The last time I talked to him, he'd mentioned having to take the bus to work because his car had broken down and he couldn't afford to fix it. Broken down. Not sold. Not stolen by his own parents. Janet, I need you to keep digging. I need to know everything. Maya, that's going to cost more money. I looked around my tiny apartment. I looked at the eviction notice that had appeared on my door that morning. I looked at my bank account balance. -$43. How much more? Give me another $500. I'll give you a full family financial picture. Bank records, property transfers, credit reports. Everything that's public record plus some things that aren't quite as public. $500. I didn't have $500. I didn't have $50. But I was starting to understand that this wasn't just about my car anymore. This was about a pattern of financial abuse that had been happening right under our noses. And if I was right, if my parents were systematically stealing from their children, then someone needed to stop them. I'll get you the money, I told Janet. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I created a GoFundMe page. The title was, Help Me Expose My Family's Theft and Get My Life Back. I told the whole story. The car, the fake surgery, Carson's new truck, Jenna's stolen motorcycle, Kyle's mysteriously broken down car. I posted the screenshots, the hospital records, the DMV transfers. I shared it on every social media platform I had. I sent it to friends, coworkers, even acquaintances from high school. Within 6 hours, I had raised $800. Within 12 hours, I had raised $1,500. People were furious on my behalf. They shared their own stories of family financial abuse. They offered legal advice, emotional support, and most importantly, they helped me understand that what was happening to me had a name. Financial exploitation by family members. It's more common than anyone wants to admit, and it's exactly as devastating as it sounds. But the best part? The absolute best part was when my phone started ringing. First it was Jenna. Maya, what the hell is this GoFundMe? Did Mom and Dad really sell my motorcycle? Then Kyle. Sis, I just saw your post. My car didn't break down. Dad told me it was totaled in an accident while it was parked at their house. Then, surprisingly, Carson. Maya, we need to talk. There's stuff you don't know. And finally, at midnight on a Tuesday, my dad called. He was furious. You've embarrassed this family, he said. You've put our private business on the internet for strangers to judge. I want you to take down that fundraiser immediately. Dad, did you sell Jenna's motorcycle? That's not the point. Did you sell Kyle's car? Maya, you don't understand the full picture. Then explain it to me. Long pause. Your mother has been sick. Another lie. I could feel it in my bones. What's wrong with Mom? She has medical expenses. We've been trying to protect you kids from the stress of it. Dad, I work in healthcare. I understand medical expenses. Show me the bills. You don't get to make demands, Maya. You're our daughter, not our creditor. Actually, Dad, I think I am your creditor. You owe me a car. He hung up. I stared at my phone, and, for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt something new. Power. I had information now. I had evidence. I had public support and a growing bank account dedicated to fighting back. My family had underestimated me, and that was going to be their biggest mistake, because I was just getting started. The call from my mother came at 3 a.m. on a Thursday. I was lying awake anyway, staring at my laptop screen and refreshing my GoFundMe page, watching the dollar amount climb and reading messages from strangers who'd been through similar betrayals. Maya, Mija, we need to talk. My mother's voice was different, smaller. The confident, commanding tone she'd used my entire life was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost frightened. It's 3 a.m, Mom. I know. I can't sleep. Your father doesn't know I'm calling. That got my attention. In 26 years, I'd never heard my mother say she was doing something without my father's knowledge. They were a unit, a front, always presenting the same story to their children. Mom, are you really sick? Long silence. Yes and no. If you've ever had someone give you an answer that makes everything worse instead of better, you know how those 3 words hit me. Yes and no. What the hell does that mean? I need you to come over tomorrow morning. Early, before your father wakes up. There are things you need to understand. Mom, I don't have a car. Remember? Take an Uber. I'll pay you back. She would pay me back. With what money? The money from my car? The money from Jenna's motorcycle? The money from Kyle's car that supposedly didn't exist anymore? But I went. I spent my last $40 on an Uber to my childhood home in Glendale at 6 a.m. on a Friday morning. The house looked the same as always, middle-class suburban ranch, landscaped front yard, 2-car garage. Nothing about it screamed, family in financial crisis. Mom opened the door before I could knock. She looked terrible, thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes and an exhaustion that seemed to go bone deep. But not sick. Not medically sick. Come in. Quietly. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd eaten countless breakfasts as a kid. The same table where my family had gathered for Sunday dinners, where we'd played board games, where I'd done homework while Mom cooked dinner and hummed along to the radio. Now it felt like a courtroom. Your father is addicted to gambling, she said without preamble. The words hung in the air between us like a physical thing. I could see them, almost touch them, These impossible words that recontextualized my entire childhood.
What?
Online poker, sports betting, slot machines at the casino. It started small, maybe 5 years ago. Just weekend trips to the reservation with his buddies. But then he discovered the apps on his phone, and it became everything. I thought about all the times my dad had been glued to his phone, all the times he'd been stressed about money despite both my parents having decent jobs, all the times they'd asked me to contribute to family expenses that seemed vaguely defined and oddly urgent. How much has he lost? Mom started crying. Not the pretty tears you see in movies, but the ugly, desperate crying of someone who's been holding in a secret that's been eating her alive. Everything, Maya. He's lost everything. The house is in foreclosure. We've been taking cash advances on credit cards to make minimum payments on other credit cards. I've been lying awake every night for 2 years trying to figure out how to feed this family. Mom, you both have jobs.
Had jobs.
He got fired 6 months ago for gambling on his work computer during office hours. I got laid off 3 weeks ago because the office is downsizing. Maya, we have nothing. Less than nothing. The kitchen felt like it was tilting. Everything I thought I knew about my family's financial situation was crumbling in real time. So, you've been selling our cars to pay Dad's gambling debts.
Not debts.
Living expenses. Maya, we haven't paid the electric bill in 3 months. We haven't paid the water bill in 2 months. I've been buying groceries with money from selling your things and your siblings' things because it was the only way to keep food on the table. Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you ask for help instead of just taking our stuff? Because I was ashamed. Because I was trying to protect you kids from seeing your father like this. Because I thought maybe if I could just hold things together long enough, he'd get help and we could fix it. Mom pulled out her phone and showed me bank statements. Checking account, $14.32. Savings account, $0. Credit cards, maxed out, all of them, with minimum payments past due. Mom, this is insane. You can't steal from your children to enable Dad's gambling addiction. I wasn't trying to steal. I was trying to survive. Maya, do you know what it's like to be 53 years old and realize your husband has gambled away your retirement, your home, your children's inheritance, everything you've worked for your entire adult life? I did not know what that was like. But I was starting to understand that this conversation was bigger and more complicated than I'd expected. Where is Dad getting money to gamble if you're broke? He takes cash advances. He sells things. Last month, he sold my grandmother's jewelry, pieces that have been in my family for generations. He told me they were stolen from the house. Jesus, Mom. And when there's nothing left to sell, he finds new ways to get credit. He opened accounts in Carson's name. In Kyle's name. In your name. My blood went cold. What do you mean, in my name? Credit cards. Store cards. He knows all your social security numbers, all your birth dates. He's been using your credit for months. I felt like I was going to throw up. Mom, that's identity theft. That's fraud. I know what it is, Maya. I know exactly what it is, and I've been trying to figure out how to fix it without destroying our family. Our family is already destroyed. Mom, he stole my car, and you helped him. He's stealing our identities, and you're sitting here making excuses. I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to explain why a woman who raised 4 children and worked 2 jobs for 30 years ended up helping her husband steal from her own kids. She pulled out a folder full of papers. Credit reports with my name on them. Credit cards I'd never applied for. Store accounts I'd never opened. Thousands of dollars in debt that belonged to me legally, but that I'd never spent. Mom, I need to call the police. If you call the police, your father goes to jail. If your father goes to jail, I lose the house immediately instead of in 3 months when the foreclosure is final. If I lose the house, I'm homeless. Maya, I'm 53 years old with no job, no savings, no credit, and no family except you kids. And if you turn your father in for fraud, Carson will never speak to you again. Why not? Because Carson knows.
Wait, what?
Carson knows Dad is gambling? Carson has been helping him. The room started spinning again. What do you mean, helping him? Carson drives him to the casino. Carson helps him figure out new betting strategies. Carson thinks gambling is just a hobby that got a little out of hand, and if they can just hit one big win, they'll be able to pay everything back and fix it all. I stared at my mother. This woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me right from wrong, who'd disciplined me for lying about homework or staying out past curfew, was sitting here telling me that my grown brother was enabling my father's gambling addiction while my father committed identity theft against his own children. Mom, that's not how gambling addiction works. There is no big win that fixes everything. There's just more losing. I know that. You know that. Your father and Carson think they're different. And Carson's truck? Carson told your father he needed reliable transportation to drive him places. Your father convinced me that selling your car to buy Carson a truck was a family investment. A family investment. Maya, I know how this sounds. I know how it looks. But you have to understand, when you're watching your husband destroy everything you've built together, and your son is encouraging him, and you haven't slept more than 3 hours at a time in 2 years because you're having panic attacks about money, you start making decisions you never thought you'd make. I looked at this woman who'd been my hero for most of my life, who'd worked nights as a nurse while going to school during the day, who'd coached my soccer team and helped with homework and made sure we had birthday parties even when money was tight, who taught me that family meant you protected each other and looked out for each other and always told the truth. And I realized she was asking me to protect her from the consequences of protecting my father from the consequences of his addiction. Mom, I can't do this anymore. What do you mean? I mean I can't be the person who pretends this is okay. I can't be the person who absorbs the damage from Dad's addiction and Carson's enabling and your whatever this is you're doing. Maya, please. There has to be a way to fix this that doesn't destroy everyone. I thought about my bank account. I thought about my eviction notice. I thought about taking 3 buses to get to a job that barely paid enough to survive, all so my father could gamble away money that wasn't as well my brother cheered him on. Mom, the family is already destroyed. You just haven't admitted it yet. I called an Uber from her driveway. As I waited for the ride, Mom came outside. Maya, if you expose this, if you turn your father in, Carson will hate you. Kyle and Jenna will be devastated. You'll tear apart this family. Mom, I didn't tear apart this family.
Dad did.
And you're asking me to sacrifice my life to keep his secret. I'm asking you to help me find a solution that works for everyone. There is no solution that works for everyone. That's the point. Someone has to absorb the consequences of Dad's choices. And I'm done being that someone. The Uber arrived. As I got in the car, Mom said one more thing. Maya, your father doesn't know I told you any of this. If you're going to do something, please give me time to figure out how to protect myself. I looked at this woman who'd helped steal my car, who'd enabled identity theft against her own children, who'd spent 2 years lying to us about why our family was falling apart. And I realized I still loved her. But love wasn't going to save any of us from this. I'll give you 3 days, Mom. 3 days to figure out how to tell Dad you told me the truth. After that, I'm moving forward with what I need to do. That night, I updated my GoFundMe with the new information. The donations poured in even faster. People were outraged about the gambling addiction, the identity theft, the systematic financial abuse. But more importantly, I started getting messages from other family members of gambling addicts. They shared resources, support groups, legal advice. And they all said the same thing. Until there are consequences for the gambling, it will never stop. My father had been gambling without consequences for 5 years. My family had been absorbing those consequences, making excuses, enabling the addiction, and protecting him from having to face what he'd done. That was about to change. My 3 days of grace period for my mother turned into a week of the most intensive research I'd ever done in my life. I'd always been detail-oriented. You have to be when you're cleaning people's teeth and handling their medical records, but this was different. This was forensic-level investigation into my own family's financial destruction. Using the GoFundMe money, I hired Janet Flores for another week of work. What she found was worse than I'd imagined. The identity theft wasn't recent. It had been going on for 3 years. My father had opened 17 different credit accounts using my social security number, Kyle's, and Jenna's. The total fraudulent debt in our names was over $60,000. But here's the part that made my blood boil. He'd been making minimum payments on some of these accounts to keep them from going delinquent, which meant he was aware enough of what he was doing to manage the fraud strategically. This wasn't desperate survival. This was calculated theft. Janet also discovered that my parents had taken out a second mortgage on their house 2 years ago. The entire amount, $45,000, had been withdrawn in cash advances and transferred to online gambling accounts. Maya, Janet told me over the phone, your father has a gambling problem, but he's also running a sophisticated financial fraud operation against his own children. These are federal crimes we're talking about. Federal crimes. My dad wasn't just a gambling addict, making poor decisions. He was a criminal who happened to be related to me. I called my siblings. Kyle, my youngest brother, cried when I told him about the credit cards in his name. Maya, I applied for an apartment last month and got rejected because of bad credit. I couldn't understand why. I've never even had a credit card. Jenna was furious. He destroyed my credit score? Maya, I've been trying to buy a house. Do you know how long it takes to repair credit damage? And Carson hung up on me. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my father. You have 48 hours to take down that fundraiser and stop spreading lies about this family, or there will be consequences. What kind of consequences, Dad? You'll find out. He hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the word consequences and what my father might mean by that. What consequences could he create for me that would be worse than what he'd already done? I found out the next morning. I arrived at work to find Dr. Morrison waiting for me in his office. He looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact as he gestured for me to sit down. Maya, I received a call yesterday from someone claiming to be your father. He said you've been stealing from patients, skimming cash payments, and using the office computer for personal business during work hours. My heart stopped. Dr. Morrison, none of that is true. I know it's not true. I've worked with you for 2 years, Maya. You're one of the most honest people I've ever employed. But he threatened to report these allegations to the dental board and to post negative reviews about the practice online unless I fired you immediately. He's trying to get me fired, so I can't afford to fight him legally. I figured as much. But, Maya, I can't have this kind of drama affecting my practice. I'm sorry, but I need to let you go. I sat there, stunned. My father had called my workplace and lied to get me fired. After stealing my car. After committing fraud in my name. After destroying my credit. He was now actively sabotaging my ability to survive independently. Dr. Morrison, I understand. But can I ask for a favor? Can you put in writing that I'm being terminated due to harassment from a family member, not for performance issues? I might need that for legal purposes. He nodded and printed out a termination letter that clearly stated I was an excellent employee being let go due to external circumstances beyond my control. As I cleaned out my locker, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Take down the fundraiser. This is your last warning. I looked around the office where I'd worked for 2 years, where I'd built relationships with patients, where I'd shown up early and stayed late, where I'd tried to build a professional reputation despite making barely enough money to survive. My father had destroyed this too. That's when something shifted inside me. The hurt and confusion and desperate hope that somehow this could all be worked out as a family, all of that evaporated. My father wasn't trying to protect the family from embarrassment. He wasn't trying to work out a solution that would help everyone. He was actively trying to destroy my life to prevent me from exposing his crimes. I walked out of that dental office, got on the bus, and rode to the police station. I'd like to report identity theft and fraud, I told the desk sergeant. The next 4 hours were a blur of paperwork, statements, and evidence submission. I provided bank records, credit reports, social media screenshots, Janet's investigative reports, and my own detailed timeline of events. Detective Rodriguez, no relation, Arizona is full of Rodriguezes, was assigned to my case. This is pretty cut and dried, he told me. Your father committed multiple felonies. We'll need to interview your siblings to get their statements about their identity theft as well. Detective, my mother knew about the gambling addiction but was trying to protect him. Is she going to be charged too? That depends on what level of participation she had in the fraud. We'll figure that out during the investigation. I left the police station feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. For the first time since this nightmare started, I'd done something proactive instead of reactive. I'd stopped trying to manage my father's consequences and started creating consequences for him instead. My phone started ringing immediately. Carson, my mother, my father, all calling repeatedly. I turned off my phone. That evening, I updated my GoFundMe again. Today I filed criminal charges against my father for identity theft, fraud, and financial abuse. I also lost my job because he called my employer and made false accusations about me to try to silence me. But I'm not being silenced. Every donation you've made has gone toward legal fees and investigation costs to expose the truth. Tomorrow, detectives will begin interviewing my siblings about the crimes committed against them. This is no longer about getting my car back. This is about stopping a predator who happens to be my father. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The fundraiser jumped from $3,000 to $8,000 overnight. People shared their own stories of retaliation from abusive family members. They offered job leads, legal advice, and most importantly, they reminded me that I wasn't alone in this fight. But the best message came from someone unexpected. My brother Kyle. Maya, I just talked to the detective. I'm giving a statement tomorrow. Thank you for being brave enough to do what I was too scared to do. Love you, sis. Then Jenna filed my police report in Seattle. My detective is coordinating with yours. We're going to get him, Maya. And then, the call I'd been dreading. Carson. Maya, you need to drop this right now. Dad made mistakes, but he's family. You're going to destroy Mom's life. You're going to destroy my life. All over a stupid car. Carson, it's not about the car anymore. It's about Dad committing felonies against his own children and you helping him do it. I never helped him commit crimes. You drove him to casinos. You helped him develop betting strategies. You encouraged his gambling while he was stealing money from us to fund it. That's not the same thing. Carson, he used my social security number to open credit cards. He used Kyle's and Jenna's too. He stole our identities. That's not a mistake. That's a federal crime. Maya, if Dad goes to prison, what happens to Mom? And there it was. The emotional manipulation I'd been expecting. Carson wasn't calling to apologize or to acknowledge what Dad had done. He was calling to make me feel guilty for having boundaries. Carson, Mom enabled this. She helped sell our cars to cover up Dad's gambling debts. She knew about the identity theft and didn't warn us. She made choices too. She was trying to hold the family together. She was trying to avoid consequences for Dad's addiction. There's a difference. Maya, I'm begging you. Drop the charges. We can work this out as a family.
How?
How do we work out $60,000 in fraudulent debt? How do we work out years of lies and theft? How do we work out the fact that Dad called my job to get me fired for trying to protect myself? We figure it out together. Carson, together has meant me absorbing the damage while you and Dad create more damage. I'm done with that version of together. If you don't drop this, I will never speak to you again. I love you, Carson, but I'm not sacrificing my life to enable Dad's addiction anymore. If that means you never speak to me again, then that's the price of having boundaries. He hung up. I sat in my empty apartment. I'd already started packing because the eviction was proceeding and realized something important. I felt free. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to manage my family's emotions or protect them from consequences or minimize my own needs to accommodate their dysfunction. I was fighting back, and it felt incredible. The next morning brought news I wasn't expecting. Detective Rodriguez called to tell me that during their investigation, they discovered something interesting. Maya, your father's gambling losses are bigger than you thought. We pulled his casino records, and he's lost over $200,000 in the past 3 years. $200,000. Where had that money come from? We're also looking into whether he's committed fraud against other family members. Do you have grandparents, aunts, uncles, anyone else who might have been victimized? I thought about my grandmother Rosa, my dad's mother, who'd been complaining lately about identity theft issues and credit card bills she didn't remember creating. Detective, I think I need to make some more phone calls. That afternoon, I called my grandmother. Abuela, have you been having problems with credit cards lately? Bills for things you didn't buy. See, Mija. I've been so confused. These companies keep calling me about money I owe, but I don't remember using their cards. I thought maybe I'm getting old, forgetting things. Abuela, what's Dad's relationship with your finances? Does he help you with bills? See, he handles everything for me. He says it's too complicated for me to understand, so he takes care of all my paperwork. My father had been stealing from his own elderly mother. I called Detective Rodriguez immediately. 2 days later, my father was arrested at his house on 12 counts of identity theft, 6 counts of fraud, and 3 counts of elder abuse. The local news picked up the story. Phoenix man arrested for defrauding family members, including elderly mother, to fund gambling addiction. My phone exploded with calls from reporters, distant relatives, family friends who'd had no idea what was happening. But the call that mattered most came from my mother. Maya, I don't know what to say. I knew about the gambling, but I didn't know about your grandmother. I didn't know it was this bad. Mom, are you okay? Are you safe? I'm scared. I'm embarrassed. I'm angry. But for the first time in 3 years, I know the truth about what we're dealing with. Mom, Dad is probably going to prison. I know. Are you going to be okay financially? I have no idea. Maya, I've been living in denial for so long, I don't even know what our real situation is anymore. Mom, I'm going to help you figure it out. But I need you to promise me something. What? I need you to promise me that you'll never ask me to protect Dad from the consequences of his choices again. I need you to promise me that we can have a relationship that doesn't involve managing his addiction. Long pause. I promise, Mija. I'm so sorry it took this long for me to understand what he was doing to you kids. That night, for the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up in a panic about money or family drama or what crisis would hit me next. My father was in jail. My siblings were finally seeing the truth about what had been happening. My mother was beginning to face reality. And I was still standing. But the story wasn't over yet. Because while I'd been fighting for justice, I'd also been planning something else. Something that would ensure my father understood exactly what his choices had cost his family. My father's arrest made the local news on a Wednesday. By Friday, I was getting calls from family members I hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting to know if the stories were true. Tia Mercedes, my dad's sister, called me crying. Maya, I lent your father $5,000 last year to help with medical bills. He told me your mother had cancer. Primo Daniel, my cousin, texted me screenshots of Venmo payments he'd sent to my dad throughout the past 2 years. He said the family was struggling and asked me not to tell anyone because you kids would be embarrassed. Maya, I sent him almost $3,000. Uncle Roberto, my mom's brother, called to tell me he'd co-signed a loan for my parents 18 months ago. $10,000 for home improvements. Maya, I'm on the hook for that loan now. My father hadn't just been stealing from his immediate family. He'd been running a sophisticated con on our entire extended family network, using different sob stories to extract money from relatives who trusted him. The total damage was staggering. When Detective Rodriguez finished his investigation, my father had stolen or fraudulently obtained over $300,000 from family members over a 4-year period. $300,000. I tried to wrap my mind around that number. $300,000 that could have bought houses, paid for college, funded small businesses, secured retirements. All of it lost to online poker and sports betting. But here's what made me angrier than the money. Every single relative he'd conned had been asked to keep it secret from the rest of the family. Don't tell Maya, she's already stressed about her own finances. Don't tell Kyle, he's too young to worry about family problems. Don't tell Jenna, she's busy with her own life in Seattle. My father had systematically isolated us from each other, preventing us from comparing stories or realizing what was happening. He'd used our love for each other as a weapon against us. Tia Mercedes organized a family meeting at her house that Saturday. Everyone came: aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. Everyone except Carson, who was still defending Dad, and my parents, who were, well, one was in jail, and one was hiding in shame. Sitting in my aunt's living room, Listening to person after person describe how my father had manipulated them, I realized something important. This wasn't just about my car anymore. This wasn't even just about financial theft. This was about a man who'd spent 4 years systematically betraying every person who loved him. Maya, said my cousin Sophia, what can we do to help you? You're the one who exposed this. You're the one who stopped him. I want to make sure this never happens again, I said. I want to make sure that when Dad gets out of prison, he can't do this to anyone else. What do you mean? Asked Uncle Roberto. I mean, I want to make sure everyone knows what he did. I want to make sure that if he tries to borrow money or asks for help or claims there's a family emergency, people will know to verify the story independently. Tia Mercedes nodded. Maya, your father is very good at making people feel sorry for him. Even now, even knowing what he did, part of me wants to visit him in jail and see if he needs anything. That's exactly the problem, I said. He's going to get out of jail, and he's going to be contrite and apologetic, and he's going to have learned new ways to manipulate people from other inmates. We need to be prepared for that. That's when I told them about my plan. I'm creating a family communication network. A group text, a Facebook group, an email list, something so that if anyone gets contacted by Dad asking for money or help, they can immediately alert everyone else. No more secrets. No more isolation. No more opportunities for him to play us against each other. My Uncle Miguel raised his hand. Maya, that sounds like we're treating your father like a dangerous criminal. Uncle Miguel, my father is a dangerous criminal. He stole $300,000 from his own family. He destroyed his children's credit. He stole from his elderly mother. He convinced his son to enable his addiction. He tried to get me fired when I exposed him. What would you call that? Silence. I would call that a dangerous criminal who happens to be related to us, said my grandmother Rosa quietly. And Maya is right. We need to protect ourselves. Everyone agreed to join the communication network. We exchanged contact information, created group chats, and established protocols for sharing information about any contact from my father. But more than that, we created something we'd never had before: transparency. For the first time in years, maybe ever, our family was talking honestly about money, about problems, about the ways we'd been manipulated and isolated from each other. It felt revolutionary. That evening, I went to visit my mother. She was staying at my Aunt Mercedes's house, having lost the family home to foreclosure the previous week. When I walked into the guest room where she was living, I barely recognized her. She'd lost at least 15 pounds. Her hair was going gray at the roots. She looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past month. How are you holding up, Mom? I don't know how to answer that question, Mija. I'm trying to figure out who I am if I'm not your father's wife. I'm trying to figure out how to live in the world when I haven't made a decision for myself in 20 years. She pulled out a notebook filled with handwriting. I've been making lists. Things I need to do, people I need to call, problems I need to solve. Maya, I had no idea how much your father controlled until he wasn't here to make decisions anymore. What's the hardest part? The lies, Maya. Not just the lies he told, but the lies I told myself. I knew something was wrong for years, but I kept telling myself it would get better, that I could manage it, that I could protect you kids from seeing how bad it was. She showed me her notebook. Page after page of plans, finding a job, applying for apartments, figuring out how to rebuild her credit, learning how to manage her own finances. Mom, I'm proud of you. For what? For letting my husband destroy our family for 4 years while I made excuses. For facing the truth now. For making a plan. For choosing to build something new instead of just waiting for Dad to fix what he broke. We talked for 2 more hours. For the first time in my adult life, I had a conversation with my mother where she wasn't asking me to manage someone else's emotions or minimize my own needs. We talked about my plans, my goals, my feelings about what had happened. It was the relationship I'd always wanted with her, but had never been able to have while she was protecting my father from consequences. As I was leaving, Mom asked me something I wasn't expecting. Maya, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive him? I thought about that question during the entire bus ride home. Did I want to forgive my father? Here's what I realized. Forgiveness wasn't the right question. The right question was, Did I want to spend the rest of my life carrying anger about what he'd done? Or did I want to focus that energy on building something better? And the answer to that question was clear. I wanted to build something better. That night, I made a decision that would define the next phase of my life. I wasn't going to spend years being angry at my father. I wasn't going to spend years trying to make him understand what he'd done, or waiting for him to apologize, or hoping he'd change. Instead, I was going to use everything I'd learned from this experience to make sure other people didn't have to go through what I'd gone through. I was going to become someone who helped people recognize financial abuse and family manipulation before it destroyed their lives. I was going to turn my father's betrayal into my life's purpose. But first, I had one more thing to do. I had to get my car back. The next morning, I called Mountain View Auto Sales. Hi, I'm calling about a 2018 Honda Civic that was sold to you 2 months ago. I'm the legal owner of that vehicle, and it was sold without my consent by someone who committed fraud to obtain the title. Ma'am, we'd need to see documentation of that. I have police reports, court records, and fraud documentation. I also have a lawyer. I didn't actually have a lawyer yet, but the GoFundMe money was now enough to hire one. Let me transfer you to our manager. An hour later, I had an appointment to meet with their legal department on Monday morning. I spent the weekend preparing. I gathered every document I could find. The original purchase agreement for the car, payment records showing I'd made every payment, insurance records, police reports about the fraud, court records from my father's arrest. Monday morning, I walked into that dealership with a folder 2 inches thick and a determination I never felt before. The manager, a woman named Patricia Williams, reviewed my documentation for 45 minutes. Ms. Rodriguez, this is clearly fraud. The person who sold us this car didn't have legal authority to do so. We're going to return your vehicle immediately and pursue restitution from the person who defrauded us. What about the money you paid for it? That's between us and the fraud perpetrator. You are the victim here, not us. 2 hours later, I was driving my car for the first time in 3 months. Sitting in the driver's seat, turning the key, hearing the engine start, it felt like getting my life back. But more than that, it felt like proof that fighting back had been worth it. As I drove home, I thought about everything that had happened since that text message on my birthday. My family had been torn apart, my father was in prison, my mother was starting over at 53, and my brother Carson still wasn't speaking to me. But I had my car back. I had my credit being repaired. I had a family that was finally talking honestly with each other. I had a purpose that was bigger than just surviving. And I had learned something about myself that I'd never known before. When pushed to my absolute limit, I don't break. I fight back. The question now was, what was I going to do with that knowledge? Getting my car back felt like winning the lottery and graduating from college at the same time. For 3 months, I'd been trapped in a cycle of expensive, unreliable transportation that had controlled every aspect of my life. Now, suddenly, I could go anywhere, anytime, without spending half my income on rideshares or losing hours of my life to Phoenix's bus system. The first thing I did was drive to every job I'd applied for during my unemployment and follow up in person. Having reliable transportation opened doors that had been closed while I was bus dependent. Within a week, I had 3 job offers. But here's the thing about trauma recovery. Sometimes getting what you thought you wanted most just reveals how much deeper the damage goes. I was sitting in my car outside a dental office that had just offered me a position, more money than I'd ever made, good benefits, professional respect, and I started crying. Not happy tears. Exhausted, overwhelmed tears of someone who'd been running on adrenaline and righteous anger for months and was finally safe enough to feel how much it had all cost me. I'd gotten my car back, but I'd lost my family. I'd exposed the truth, but I destroyed relationships that had taken decades to build. I'd fought for justice, but I was more alone than I'd ever been in my life. That's when my phone rang. It was Kyle. Can I take you to lunch? I need to talk to you about something. We met at a little Mexican place near his apartment. Kyle looked different, older, more serious. Like the events of the past few months had forced him to grow up in ways he hadn't been ready for. Sis, I owe you an apology, he said before we'd even ordered food. Kyle, you don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. When you first posted about the car, I thought you were overreacting. I thought it was just family drama that would blow over. I didn't take it seriously until the detective called me about the credit cards. He pulled out his phone and showed me his credit report. Maya, Dad destroyed my credit so completely that I can't get approved for an apartment. I can't get a car loan. I can't even get a cell phone contract. At 22 years old, my financial life is ruined before it ever started. Kyle, we can fix that. There are legal processes for fraud victims to repair their credit. That's not the point. The point is that you were protecting all of us, and instead of supporting you, I judged you for making waves. I was more worried about keeping the peace than I was about justice. Kyle reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Maya, you saved us. If you hadn't been brave enough to fight back, Dad would still be stealing from us, from the whole family. We'd all be in financial ruins, and we wouldn't even know why. That conversation changed something fundamental in how I saw what I'd been through. I'd been thinking about it as a story about losing my family. But Kyle helped me see it differently. It was a story about saving my family from someone who was destroying us. Kyle, what's happening with Carson? Is he still defending Dad? Kyle's face darkened. Carson is having a hard time accepting that Dad isn't who he thought he was. He's been visiting Dad in jail, and Dad is apparently telling him that this is all a misunderstanding, that the family overreacted, that the gambling wasn't as bad as everyone is making it seem. Kyle, Dad stole $300,000 from our family. I know that. You know that.
Jenna knows that.
Mom is starting to accept that. But Carson thinks Dad is being punished too harshly for what amounts to a family disagreement about money. I felt that familiar surge of anger, but it was different now. Instead of the desperate, frantic anger of someone fighting for survival, this was the cold, focused anger of someone who'd already won the battle and was now dealing with the aftermath. Kyle, Carson is 24 years old. He's old enough to make his own decisions about who to believe and who to support. I can't save him from the consequences of those decisions. Maya, I think Carson is scared. Scared of what? Scared of admitting that he helped Dad gamble away our family's future. Scared of facing the fact that all those trips to the casino weren't innocent father-son bonding time. Scared of accepting that he enabled Dad's destruction of our family. That perspective hadn't occurred to me. I'd been thinking of Carson as stubborn or manipulated. But Kyle was right. Carson was scared. And fear makes people do irrational things, like defend people who've hurt them. Kyle, what can we do about that? Honestly, nothing. Carson has to come to his own realizations in his own time. But Maya, we can't let Carson's fear prevent the rest of us from healing. After lunch, Kyle and I drove to visit our grandmother Rosa. She was living with Tia Mercedes now, having lost her apartment when the fraudulent bills became unmanageable. Abuela looked frail but alert. She hugged me for a long time when I walked in. Mija, thank you for protecting this family. I know it cost you a lot. Abuela, how are you doing? Are you okay financially? Mercedes is taking care of me. But Maya, I need to tell you something important. I've been thinking about this situation for weeks, and I want to make sure you understand something. She led me to the kitchen table and pulled out a photo album I'd never seen before. These are pictures of your grandfather when we were young. Your father looks just like him at that age. She showed me pictures of a handsome young man in his 20s, smiling and confident. Your grandfather was also addicted to gambling. He lost our first house, our car, our savings. He stole from his family, lied to his wife, destroyed relationships with his children. My grandmother had never told us this story before. Abuela, what happened to him? He never stopped, Maya. He promised and apologized and swore he'd change, but he never stopped. When your father was 10 years old, his father left us with nothing but debt and disappeared. We never saw him again. She closed the photo album and looked at me directly. Maya, you did the right thing. Addiction is a disease, but stealing from family is a choice. Your father made the same choices his father made, and he would have kept making them until he destroyed all of you the way his father destroyed us. Abuela, do you think Dad will change? Do you think prison will help him? I hope so, Mija. But I learned a long time ago that hoping an addict will change and protecting yourself from their choices are two different things. You can do both, but you have to do the second one first. That evening, driving home from my grandmother's house, I had a realization that would change the direction of my life. I'd spent months learning how to recognize financial manipulation, how to investigate fraud, how to navigate the legal system, how to build support networks, how to protect myself and my family from someone who is supposed to love us. These were skills that other people needed. I thought about all the messages I'd received through my GoFundMe page. Hundreds of people sharing their own stories of financial abuse by family members. People asking for advice, for resources, for hope that they could survive what I'd survived. I pulled over and called Janet Flores, the private investigator who'd helped me uncover the truth about my family's situation. Janet, I want to learn how to do what you do. I want to help other people investigate financial fraud by family members. Maya, that's a big career change. Are you sure? Janet, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Okay. There are licensing requirements, training programs, apprenticeship opportunities. It's not easy, but if you're serious, I can help you get started. I'm serious. Maya, can I ask you something? What made you decide to do this? I thought about my grandmother's photo album. I thought about Kyle's destroyed credit. I thought about all the relatives who'd been conned by my father. I thought about my mother, learning at 53 how to make decisions for herself. Janet, my father didn't just steal money from us. He stole our ability to trust each other. He isolated us from each other using our own love as a weapon. He made us all complicit in hiding his addiction by making us feel responsible for protecting him from consequences. And you want to help other people recognize that pattern? I want to help other people break that pattern before it destroys their lives the way it almost destroyed ours. That night, I updated my GoFundMe page one more time. Thank you to everyone who supported me through this journey. Because of your donations, I was able to hire investigators, pay legal fees, and expose a pattern of financial abuse that had been destroying my family for years. I got my car back, my father is facing justice, and my family is finally free to heal. Now, I want to use what I've learned to help others in similar situations. I'm starting training to become a private investigator specializing in family financial fraud. Every remaining dollar from this fundraiser will go toward that training and toward creating resources for other victims of family financial abuse. If you've shared your story with me, if you've supported this campaign, if you've been through something similar yourself, thank you for showing me that I wasn't alone in this fight. And if you're currently going through something like this, if someone in your family is stealing from you, lying to you, isolating you from each other, please know that you have options. You have rights. You have people who will believe you and help you. You don't have to absorb other people's consequences forever. You don't have to sacrifice your life to enable someone else's addiction. You don't have to keep family secrets that are destroying you. Fight back. It's worth it. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People offered to help with my training, to refer clients, to create a network of professionals who understood family financial abuse. But the message that mattered most came from someone I wasn't expecting. Carson. Maya, I read your update. I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I need to talk to you. Can we meet? I agreed to meet Carson at a coffee shop in Scottsdale, neutral territory, where neither of us had history or baggage. I arrived early and sat by the window, watching cars pull into the parking lot and wondering if I was making a mistake. Carson and I hadn't spoken in 4 months. The last conversation we'd had was him hanging up on me after demanding I drop the charges against Dad. I'd been prepared to never see him again, to accept that protecting myself had cost me my relationship with my brother. But here he was, walking through the door, looking like he'd lost 20 pounds and aged 5 years. He sat down across from me without ordering anything, just stared at his hands for a long minute before speaking. Maya, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. Carson, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Maya, I was wrong about everything. I was wrong about Dad, wrong about the gambling, wrong about what you were doing, wrong about what family loyalty means. He looked up at me, and I could see he'd been crying recently. Carson never cried. Even as a kid, he was the tough one, the one who walked off injuries and never showed vulnerability. Maya, I went to see Dad in jail last week. I've been visiting him every week since he was arrested, trying to understand how this all went so wrong so fast. And last week, he asked me something that made me realize what you've been trying to tell me all along. What did he ask you? He asked me if I could lend him money for commissary. Maya, our father is sitting in jail for stealing $300,000 from our family, and he's asking his son to send him money. Carson started crying then, the kind of crying that comes from deep recognition of something you've been avoiding for a long time. Maya, he doesn't think he did anything wrong. Even now, even facing prison time, even knowing what he put all of us through, he thinks the family overreacted. He thinks you and Kyle and Jenna and Mom are being too sensitive about money. Carson, what made you realize that wasn't normal? I was talking to my cellmate, I was talking to another visitor, someone whose son is in jail for theft. And she said something that hit me like a truck. She said, if your dad doesn't understand why stealing from his children was wrong, then he's going to keep doing it when he gets out. Carson wiped his eyes and looked at me directly for the first time since he'd sat down. Maya, I spent 4 years driving Dad to casinos because I thought I was helping him relax and have fun. I thought gambling was just his hobby. Even when I knew he was losing more than he should, I told myself it was his money and his choice. Carson, you didn't know about the identity theft or the fraud. But I knew he was lying to Mom about how much he was losing. I knew he was stressed about money, but kept gambling anyway. I knew he was borrowing money from relatives and not paying it back. Maya, I knew enough to know something was wrong, but I didn't want to see it. Carson pulled out his phone and showed me photos from the past year. Pictures of him and Dad at various casinos, both of them smiling. Dad with his arm around Carson's shoulders. Look at these pictures, Maya. I look so proud to be Dad's gambling buddy. I thought we had this special bond that you and Kyle and Jenna didn't have with him. I thought I was the good son because I supported his interests instead of judging him. Carson, Dad manipulated you too.
No, Maya.
Dad gave me opportunities to see the truth, and I chose not to see it because it was easier to be the favorite son than it was to ask hard questions. He put his phone away and leaned forward. Maya, when you first posted about the car, I was angry at you because I thought you were trying to destroy the family over money. But now I understand that Dad was destroying the family with money, and you were trying to save us. Carson, I wasn't trying to save anyone. I was trying to survive. That's exactly what I mean. Maya, you were drowning, and instead of throwing you a life preserver, I was mad at you for splashing around too much. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I watched Carson process emotions I'd never seen him express before: shame, regret, genuine remorse. Carson, where do we go from here? I don't know. Maya, I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness. I know I can't undo 4 months of defending Dad while you were fighting for your life. I know I can't take back telling you I'd never speak to you again if you didn't drop the charges. Carson, what changed your mind? Was it just the conversation with Dad in jail?
No.
Maya, I've been reading everything you posted about becoming a private investigator, about helping other families going through financial abuse. And I realized something that made me sick to my stomach. What? I realized that if another family was going through what we went through, and someone told me their father was gambling away their money while stealing their identities, I would tell them to call the police immediately.
I would tell them to protect themselves.
I would tell them that family loyalty doesn't mean enabling criminal behavior. Carson started crying again. Maya, I would never tell another person to sacrifice their financial security to protect an addicted parent. But that's exactly what I expected you to do. I had different standards for you than I would have for a stranger. Carson, why do you think that is? Because it was easier to blame you for rocking the boat than it was to admit that Dad was sinking the boat. That phrase, rocking the boat versus sinking the boat, was something I'd been learning about in my research on family dysfunction. The person who points out the problem gets blamed for creating drama, while the person actually creating the problem gets protected from consequences. Carson, have you talked to Kyle and Jenna about this? Kyle, yes. He helped me understand a lot of things I was too stubborn to see. Jenna is still pretty angry at me. She said I can call her when I figured out how to apologize without making it about my feelings. What did she mean by that? She meant that saying, "I'm sorry I hurt you," is different from saying, "I'm sorry I was wrong." She said I've been apologizing for hurting people's feelings instead of acknowledging that I made objectively wrong choices. Carson was learning the difference between taking responsibility and managing other people's emotions about his behavior. It was a distinction that had taken me months to understand. Carson, what do you want from me? What do you want our relationship to look like going forward? Honestly, I want to earn back your trust. I want to support what you're doing with the PI training. I want to learn how to be a brother who protects his sister instead of a brother who enables the people who hurt her. Carson, how do you want to support what I'm doing? He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder. Maya, I kept detailed records of every casino trip Dad and I took. Dates, locations, amounts he said he won or lost, conversations we had about his gambling strategies. I thought I was helping him track his progress, but really I was documenting his addiction. He slid the folder across the table to me. I want you to have this. Maybe it can help other families recognize the warning signs I missed. Maybe it can help you understand how enablers get manipulated too. I opened the folder. Page after page of Carson's handwriting, documenting 2 years of Dad's gambling escalation. Notes about Dad's mood changes, his excuses for losses, his promises to quit, his strategies for winning it all back. It was a psychology textbook on gambling addiction written by an unknowing participant. Carson, this is incredibly detailed. Maya, I thought I was being a good son by paying attention to Dad's interests. I thought I was helping him by being supportive. I didn't realize I was creating evidence of his disease progression. I flipped through more pages. Carson had noted patterns. Dad gambled more when he was stressed about money. Dad made bigger bets after small wins. Dad became secretive about losses, but bragged about wins. Dad always believed the next big win was just around the corner. Carson, did you realize at the time that these patterns were problematic? I thought they were normal. Maya, I'd never been around gambling before. I didn't know what healthy gambling looked like versus addictive gambling. Dad told me this was just how all serious gamblers behaved. Carson, what made you finally realize it wasn't normal? The therapy. You're in therapy? Maya, I've been in therapy since the week after Dad was arrested. I needed to understand how I got so completely wrong about something so important. My therapist helped me see that Dad used my desire to be close to him as a way to recruit me into his addiction. Carson explained that he'd been attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings for family members, learning about the patterns of addiction and enablement. Maya, I learned that what happened to our family follows a very predictable script. The addict isolates family members from each other, creates financial chaos that the family scrambles to manage, uses family loyalty as emotional leverage to avoid consequences, and recruits family members to participate in or cover up the addiction. And you were recruited to participate. I was recruited to be Dad's gambling partner and his defender when the family questioned his behavior. Maya, I wasn't just enabling his addiction, I was actively helping him hide it from the rest of the family. We talked for another 2 hours. Carson told me about the therapy, about his meetings with other family members of addicts, about his growing understanding of how manipulation works within families. But more than that, he told me about his guilt. Maya, while you were taking buses to work and getting evicted and fighting for your survival, I was driving a truck that was bought with money stolen from you. I was living in the basement rent-free, while you couldn't afford rent. I was defending the person who was destroying your life. Carson, you didn't know the extent of what Dad was doing. But I knew enough to know something was wrong, and I chose to look the other way because it was easier than confronting Dad or admitting I'd been part of the problem. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Carson asked me something I wasn't expecting. Maya, would you let me help with your PI training? Not financially, I know I don't have the right to try to buy back your trust. But practically, I know how enablers think because I was one. I know how family members get manipulated because I was manipulated. Maybe that perspective could be useful for the work you want to do. I thought about that offer. Carson understood the psychology of enablement from the inside. He could help other families recognize the warning signs he'd missed. He could help people understand how good intentions can be weaponized by addicts. Carson, what would that look like? I don't know. Maybe I could be a resource for family members who are struggling to understand how they got recruited into enabling addiction. Maybe I could help you develop materials about recognizing manipulation tactics. Maybe I could just be someone who answers the phone when family members need to talk to someone who understands what they're going through. Carson, that would mean admitting publicly that you enabled Dad's addiction. Maya, I'm already planning to do that. My therapist says that making amends means taking responsibility publicly, not just privately. I need to be honest about my role and what happened to our family. I looked at my brother, really looked at him for the first time in months. He looked exhausted but clearer than I'd seen him since we were teenagers. Like he'd finally stopped fighting reality and was ready to work with it instead. Carson, I'd like that. I'd like to have you as part of what I'm building. Thank you, Maya. And Maya? I need you to know something else. What? I'm proud of you. I'm proud that you fought back when the rest of us were too scared or too confused or too manipulated to fight back. I'm proud that you saved our family even when we weren't grateful for being saved. Carson, I wasn't trying to save anyone. I was just trying to
survive. I know.
But Maya, sometimes surviving an impossible situation is the same thing as saving everyone else who's trapped in it. That evening, I called Kyle and Jenna to tell them about my conversation with Carson. Kyle was cautiously optimistic. Maya, I think Carson is genuinely trying to change. The therapy seems to be helping him understand things he couldn't see before. Jenna was more skeptical. Maya, I'm glad Carson is in therapy and I'm glad he apologized to you. But I need to see sustained changes in his behavior, not just his words. I need to see him actually supporting you instead of just saying he wants to support you. Jenna was right to be cautious. Apologies are easy. Change behavior is hard. But over the next few weeks, Carson proved that his apology wasn't just words. He drove me to my PI training classes when my car was in the shop. He helped me research licensing requirements and training programs. He connected me with his therapist who specialized in family addiction dynamics and was willing to consult on my cases. Most importantly, he started sharing his own story publicly. Carson wrote a blog post titled, "How I Helped My Father Destroy Our Family, a Guide to Recognizing Enablement." He posted it on social media, shared it in recovery groups, and sent it to everyone in our extended family. The response was immediate and powerful. Other family members of addicts reached out to Carson, sharing their own stories of enablement and manipulation. People thanked him for helping them recognize patterns in their own families. Carson was turning his experience as an enabler into a resource for preventing enablement in other families. But the most important response came from someone I wasn't expecting, my father. 3 weeks after Carson's blog post went viral, I got a call from the county jail. Maya, this is your father. I'm calling to ask you to convince Carson to stop embarrassing the family with these public confessions. Dad, Carson is sharing his story to help other people. Carson is making the family look bad. He's making me look like a monster. Dad, you stole $300,000 from your own family. You committed identity theft against your children. You tried to get me fired when I exposed your crimes. You are a monster. Long pause. Maya, I want you to know that I'm getting help in here. I'm attending AA meetings, I'm working with a counselor, I'm learning about addiction. Dad, that's good. I hope you get the help you need. Maya, when I get out, I want to make things right with the family. Dad, making things right means accepting responsibility for what you did and focusing on your own recovery. It doesn't mean asking your children to protect you from the consequences of your choices. Maya, I need my family's support to recover successfully. Dad, you need professional support to recover successfully. You need your family to maintain healthy boundaries so you can't manipulate us into enabling your addiction again. Another long pause. Maya, Carson's blog post is making it harder for me to rehabilitate my reputation. Dad, your reputation isn't something that can be rehabilitated by managing other people's stories. Your reputation can only be rebuilt by years of consistently different choices. Maya, you've become very hard. Dad, I've become very healthy. There's a difference. I hung up. That conversation helped me understand something important. My father still didn't grasp the magnitude of what he'd done to our family. He was still thinking about reputation management and family image instead of taking genuine responsibility. But Carson's transformation was real. And watching my brother evolve from an enabler into an advocate gave me hope that families could heal from financial abuse, even when the abuse had been severe and sustained. It also gave me a clear vision for the work I wanted to do as a private investigator. I didn't just want to help people gather evidence of financial crimes. I wanted to help families understand the psychology behind financial abuse so they could recognize manipulation tactics and protect themselves from being recruited into enabling addiction or criminal behavior. I wanted to help people understand the difference between family loyalty and family exploitation. I wanted to help people understand that fighting back against financial abuse wasn't selfish or disloyal. It was necessary for the health of everyone involved. And I wanted to help people understand that surviving an impossible situation could be the first step towards saving everyone else who was trapped in it. 6 months after my father's arrest, I received my private investigator's license in the mail. It was a piece of paper that represented thousands of hours of study, dozens of interviews with victims of family financial abuse, and a complete transformation of how I understood my purpose in the world. Janet Flores, who had become my mentor and eventually my business partner, called to congratulate me. "Maya, you're officially qualified to ruin family dinners for money," she said, and I could hear her smiling through the phone. "Janet, is it weird that I'm more excited about this than I was about graduating college?" "Not weird at all. College taught you how to clean teeth. This license is going to let you clean up people's lives." That evening, Carson came over to help me set up my home office. We'd converted my tiny apartment into a combination living space and business headquarters. It wasn't glamorous, but it was functional and, more importantly, it was mine. "Maya, your first consultation is tomorrow, right?" Carson asked while helping me arrange filing cabinets.
Yeah.
"A woman named Linda, whose son has been stealing from her retirement account. She thinks he's just borrowing money, but her financial advisor thinks it's systematic theft. Are you nervous?" I thought about that question. A year ago, I would have been terrified to confront someone else's family financial crisis. I would have felt unqualified, overwhelmed, responsible for fixing problems that weren't mine to fix.
Now
I felt prepared. "Carson, I'm not nervous. I'm ready." The next morning, Linda Martinez sat in my living room holding a folder full of bank statements and looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Maya, I don't know what to do. Michael is my only child, and he's been helping me manage my finances since my husband died 3 years ago. But lately, there have been withdrawals I don't remember authorizing, transfers I don't understand, and when I ask Michael about them, he gets defensive and angry." Linda was 72 years old, a retired teacher living on Social Security and her late husband's pension. She trusted her son to help her navigate online banking and investment management, and he'd been systematically stealing from her for over a year. "Linda, how much money are we talking about?" $47,000 so far. "Maya, that's almost half of my retirement savings." I reviewed Linda's bank records while she told me about her relationship with Michael. He was 45 years old, recently divorced, struggling with debt from his failed marriage. He'd moved in with Linda after his divorce, ostensibly to help her around the house and provide companionship. But the timeline of the thefts corresponded exactly with Michael's move into Linda's house. "Linda, when you confront Michael about these transactions, what does he say?" "He says I'm getting confused in my old age. He says I authorized the transactions but forgot about them. He says I should be grateful he's helping me manage money that's too complicated for me to understand." The manipulation tactics were identical to what my father had used on our family. Gaslighting, condescension, exploitation of trust and dependency, emotional blackmail disguised as family loyalty. "Linda, what do you want to happen here? What would a good outcome look like for you?" "I want my money back. I want Michael to get help for whatever is causing him to steal from his own mother. And I want to make sure this never happens again." "Linda, those are 3 different goals that might require different approaches. Getting your money back might require criminal charges. Getting Michael help might require intervention and treatment. Making sure it never happens again might require changing how you manage your finances going forward. Maya, can we do all three? We can try. But Linda, I need you to understand something important. Your son might not be grateful for being stopped. People who are stealing from family members often get angry when they're exposed, even when the exposure leads to help they desperately need. Linda started crying. Maya, Michael is all I have left. If I lose him, I'll be completely alone. Linda, if you don't stop him, you'll lose your retirement security and he'll continue down a path that could land him in prison. Sometimes protecting someone means being willing to risk them being angry at you. It took Linda 3 weeks to decide to move forward with reporting the theft. During those 3 weeks, Michael stole an additional $8,000 from her accounts. When Linda finally called the police, Michael's reaction was exactly what I'd predicted: rage, denial, and accusations that his mother was being manipulated by outside influences who didn't understand their family arrangement. Michael was arrested on charges of elder financial abuse. Linda changed all her passwords, moved her accounts to a new bank, and started working with a financial advisor who specialized in helping seniors protect their assets from family exploitation. But Linda's case taught me something important about the work I was doing. Stopping financial abuse doesn't automatically heal the relationships damaged by that abuse. Linda got her money back through restitution requirements in Michael's plea agreement. Michael was sentenced to probation and ordered to attend counseling for gambling addiction because, as it turned out, he'd been stealing his mother's retirement money to fund online poker playing. But Linda and Michael's relationship was permanently changed. He moved out of her house and barely spoke to her for months. When he did call, it was usually to ask for money or to blame her for destroying the family by involving the police. Linda struggled with guilt and loneliness, wondering if she'd made the right choice in stopping her son's theft. Maya, did I do the right thing? She asked me during our final meeting. Linda, you did the only thing that could potentially save both your financial security and your son's future. Michael was on a path towards stealing your entire retirement and potentially committing more serious crimes to fund his gambling addiction. You stopped him before he destroyed both of your lives completely. But Maya, he hates me now. Linda, Michael is angry at you for stopping him from stealing, not for anything you did wrong. There's a big difference. 6 months later, Linda called me with an update. Michael had completed his court-ordered counseling and had been attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings regularly. He'd apologized to his mother and asked for her help in finding a way to rebuild their relationship on healthier terms. Maya, Michael asked if he could come to family therapy with me. He said he wants to understand how his stealing affected me and how we can have a relationship that doesn't involve him managing my money. That phone call reminded me why the work was worth it. Yes, stopping financial abuse often damaged relationships in the short term. But it created opportunities for healthier relationships in the long term, relationships based on honesty instead of exploitation. Over the next year, I worked on dozens of similar cases. Adult children stealing from elderly parents. Parents draining their children's college funds for gambling or shopping addictions. Siblings manipulating family members with disabilities to access their benefits. Each case followed similar patterns. The victim initially wanted to handle the situation within the family. The perpetrator used emotional manipulation to avoid consequences, and recovery required professional intervention and legal boundaries. But I also started seeing patterns that went beyond individual families. Many of my clients had been isolated from other family members or friends who might have recognized the financial abuse. Many had been convinced that family problems should be kept private, even when those problems involved crimes. Many had been taught that family loyalty meant absorbing other people's consequences indefinitely. I started developing educational materials about these patterns. Workshops for seniors about recognizing elder financial abuse. Support groups for family members of addicts. Resource guides for people navigating family financial crises. The work grew beyond individual investigations into community education and prevention. And then, 1 year after I'd received my PI license, I got a call that would change everything again. Maya, this is Detective Rodriguez. I have a case I think you'd be interested in. A family financial abuse situation that's bigger than anything we've seen before. Are you available to consult? Detective, How big are we talking? Maya, we're talking about a family financial abuse ring that's been operating for over a decade. Multiple families, multiple victims, systematic exploitation. And the person at the center of it all is someone who learned their tactics by watching your father's case. My blood went cold. Detective, what do you mean, someone who learned from my father's case? Maya, we have evidence that your father has been running financial education sessions for other inmates, teaching them how to commit family fraud more effectively. He's been using your family's story as a case study in what works and what doesn't when stealing from relatives. I sat down hard. My father, even in prison, was still finding ways to destroy families. Detective Rodriguez, what do you need from me? Maya, we need you to help us understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. And we need your help developing strategies to protect the families involved. Maya, there are 47 victims across 6 different families. The total theft is over $2 million. $2 million. 47 victims. 6 families destroyed by techniques my father had perfected and was now teaching to other criminals. I thought about Linda Martinez and her son Michael. I thought about my grandmother Rosa and her fraudulent credit cards. I thought about Kyle's destroyed credit and Jenna's stolen motorcycle and my own car being sold to fund my father's addiction. And I realized that my personal story of family financial abuse had become part of a much larger pattern of exploitation that was spreading beyond my father, beyond our family, beyond anything I'd imagined when I first decided to fight back. Detective, I'm in. Whatever you need, I'm in. That night, I called Carson. Carson, Dad is teaching other inmates how to steal from their families. He's using our story as an example of how to commit family financial fraud effectively. Long pause. Maya, that's the most Dad thing I've ever heard. Even in prison, even after losing everything, he's still finding ways to monetize the damage he caused. Carson, Detective Rodriguez wants me to consult on a case involving multiple families who were victimized using Dad's techniques. Are you willing to help? Maya, what would that involve? It would involve us sharing our story with law enforcement to help them understand how family financial abuse works from the inside. It would involve us potentially testifying about Dad's methods and helping other victims understand what they've been through. Maya, are you asking me if I'm willing to help stop other families from going through what we went through? That's exactly what I'm asking. Maya, that's not even a question. Of course I'm in. As I hung up the phone, I realized something that made me smile for the first time in weeks. My father thought he was teaching other people how to be better criminals. But what he was really doing was providing law enforcement with a detailed blueprint for recognizing, investigating, and prosecuting family financial abuse. He was creating the evidence that would be used to protect other families from people exactly like him. And Carson and I were going to help make sure that evidence was used as effectively as possible. My father had spent years using our love against us, isolating us from each other, manipulating us into protecting him from the consequences of his choices. Now Carson and I were going to use everything we'd learned from that experience to protect other families from similar manipulation. We were going to turn our father's criminal behavior into other families' protection. It was the perfect revenge, helping other people avoid becoming victims of the techniques that had been used to victimize us. The federal courtroom was packed on the morning of the multifamily financial abuse trial. Detective Rodriguez had been right about the scope of the case. My father's prison university had graduated 12 inmates who'd gone on to steal over $2 million from 47 family members across 6 different families. I sat in the witness section next to Carson, both of us wearing suits and carrying folders full of documentation about our own family's experience with the techniques being prosecuted. Janet Flores squeezed my shoulder as the proceedings began. Maya, are you ready for this? Janet, I've been ready for this my entire life.
I just didn't know it until now.
The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. They detailed how my father had systematically documented his methods of family financial abuse and shared those methods with other inmates facing similar charges. How he taught them to exploit family loyalty, manipulate trust relationships, gaslight victims into doubting their own perceptions, and use emotional blackmail to avoid consequences. The defense tried to argue that my father was simply sharing his personal experiences, not teaching criminal techniques. Then the prosecution played recorded phone calls from the prison. My father's voice, clear as day, "The key is to make them feel responsible for your problems." Maya felt responsible for my gambling debts, so she didn't question why I needed her car money. If you can make your family feel guilty for having boundaries, they'll give you access to everything. Another recording. Carson was easy to manipulate because he wanted to be the favorite son. Find out what each family member wants most: attention, approval, inclusion, and use that need to recruit them into helping you. Another. The most important thing is to isolate them from each other. Maya couldn't compare notes with her siblings because I'd convinced each of them to keep family financial problems secret. Isolation prevents discovery. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to my father explain how he'd systematically destroyed our family's ability to trust each other, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. This man had spent so much energy learning how to exploit the people who loved him that he'd never learned how to actually accept love without exploiting it. But the pity was brief, because the prosecution wasn't done. They played recordings of my father bragging about the sophistication of his fraud operation, about how he'd managed to steal from 3 generations of his family without getting caught for 4 years, about how he'd convinced his own mother that she was getting confused when she questioned fraudulent charges on her credit cards. The old woman never suspected me because I was the one helping her manage her finances, my father's voice said through the courtroom speakers. I was solving problems I was creating. It's the perfect setup. I watched the jury's faces during those recordings.
Disgust.
Horror. Recognition of how calculated and cruel systematic family financial abuse really is. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the witness stand feeling calmer than I'd felt in 2 years. The prosecutor asked me to describe what it had been like to discover that my car had been sold without my knowledge. It felt like discovering that someone had been living in my house without my permission, I said. Not just taking my possessions, but violating my sense of safety and autonomy in ways that were invisible until the violation was complete. Ms. Rodriguez, how did your father's financial abuse affect your relationship with your siblings? He used our love for each other as a weapon against us. He convinced each of us to keep his financial problems secret from the others, which meant we couldn't compare stories or recognize patterns. We were all trying to protect each other from information we needed to protect ourselves. Ms. Rodriguez, what was the most damaging aspect of your father's financial abuse? I thought about that question for a long moment. The most damaging aspect was that he taught us not to trust our own perceptions. When something felt wrong, he convinced us that our feelings were wrong. When we questioned his explanations, he convinced us that our questions were disloyal. He didn't just steal our money. He stole our confidence in our own judgment. Ms. Rodriguez, how has this experience affected your career choices? It taught me that family financial abuse is a crime that destroys families from the inside out, and that most victims don't recognize what's happening to them until the damage is severe. I became a private investigator specializing in family financial crimes because I want to help people recognize these patterns before they lose everything. Ms. Rodriguez, do you believe your father understands the harm he caused your family? I looked across the courtroom at my father, sitting at the defense table in his orange jumpsuit. He was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not quite anger, not quite sadness, something that might have been disappointment that I was testifying against him. I believe my father understands that his actions had consequences he didn't want. I don't believe he understands that those consequences were the natural result of choices he made repeatedly over several years. I think he still sees himself as a victim of circumstances rather than as someone who created those circumstances through criminal behavior. When Carson testified, he spoke about the psychology of enablement with a clarity that came from years of therapy and recovery work. Your Honor, I want the court to understand that enablers aren't just passive victims of manipulation. We make active choices to ignore warning signs, to make excuses for criminal behavior, and to protect addicts from consequences that might motivate them to get help. Mr. Rodriguez, why did you choose to enable your father's gambling addiction? Because it was easier than confronting him. Because I wanted to believe I was the good son who supported Dad when everyone else was being difficult. because I thought loyalty meant never questioning family members, even when their behavior was destructive. Mr. Rodriguez, what would you want other family members of addicts to understand about enablement? I would want them to understand that protecting someone from consequences isn't the same thing as protecting them from harm. When you enable addiction, you're actually ensuring that the addiction will continue and the harm will get worse. The trial lasted 6 days. All 6 family groups that had been victimized testified about the techniques that had been used against them, techniques my father had systematically taught to other inmates. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. My father was sentenced to 12 additional years in federal prison for teaching criminal techniques to other inmates and for conspiracy to commit financial fraud across state lines. The other defendants, the graduates of my father's prison university, received sentences ranging from 3 to 8 years, depending on the scope of their individual crimes. But more importantly, the trial had created legal precedent for prosecuting the teaching of family financial abuse techniques as a federal conspiracy crime. As we left the courthouse, Carson turned to me and said something that summarized everything we'd been through. Maya, do you realize what just happened? Dad tried to use our family's destruction as a blueprint for destroying other families. Instead, we turned our family's recovery into a blueprint for protecting other families. That evening, I updated my website with a new blog post. Today, my brother and I testified in federal court about our experience as victims of systematic family financial abuse. Our father had been teaching other inmates how to steal from their families using techniques he'd perfected during 4 years of stealing from us. But here's what our father didn't understand about the story he was telling. It wasn't a story about successful criminal techniques. It was a story about how families can recover from financial abuse when they choose truth over secrecy, justice over false peace, and healthy boundaries over toxic loyalty. Every technique our father taught other criminals is also a warning sign that other families can learn to recognize. Every manipulation tactic he perfected is also a red flag that can help people protect themselves. Our father thought he was teaching people how to be better criminals. Instead, he was creating a detailed curriculum for recognizing, investigating, and prosecuting family financial abuse. Today, 12 people were convicted of federal crimes based on techniques they learned from our father. 47 families received restitution and justice. A legal precedent was established that will make it easier to prosecute similar crimes in the future. But most importantly, today proved that surviving family financial abuse isn't just about getting your money back or seeing justice served. It's about turning your experience with victimization into expertise that protects other people from becoming victims. It's about transforming the knowledge that was used to hurt you into wisdom that helps others heal. It's about realizing that the best revenge against people who exploit family relationships is to help other families build relationships too healthy to be exploited. 3 years ago, I was a dental assistant making $9 an hour, taking buses to work because my father had sold my car to fund his gambling addiction. Today, I'm a private investigator specializing in family financial crimes, and I just helped convict 12 people of federal financial abuse charges. 3 years ago, my brother was enabling our father's gambling addiction and defending his criminal behavior against his own siblings. Today, my brother is a recovery advocate who helps other family members understand the difference between loyalty and enablement. 3 years ago, our family was isolated from each other by secrets, lies, and manipulation. Today, our family has transparent communication, healthy boundaries, and relationships based on honesty instead of exploitation. The car I fought so hard to get back? I sold it last month and used the money to make a down payment on an office space for my growing practice. The family I thought I was losing when I exposed our father's crimes? We're closer now than we've ever been, because we're finally free to love each other without managing anyone's addiction or absorbing anyone's consequences. The reputation I was afraid I'd destroy by speaking publicly about family financial abuse? It became the foundation for a career helping other families protect themselves from similar abuse. If you're currently experiencing family financial abuse, if someone you're related to is stealing from you, manipulating you, isolating you from other family members, or using your love against you, please know that you have options. You don't have to manage other people's addictions. You don't have to absorb other people's consequences. You don't have to sacrifice your financial security to maintain family relationships. You don't have to keep secrets that are destroying you. Fighting back is not selfish. Setting boundaries is not disloyal. Protecting yourself is not betraying your family. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their destruction of it. And sometimes the best revenge against people who exploit your loyalty is to build a life so healthy that their manipulation tactics no longer work on you. Thank you to everyone who supported me through this journey. Thank you to everyone who shared their own stories of family financial abuse. Thank you to everyone who helped me understand that surviving victimization and preventing other people's victimization are two parts of the same healing process. And if you're watching this video and recognizing your own family's patterns in this story, please know that you're not alone, you're not crazy, and you have more power than you realize to change your situation. The hardest part is deciding that you deserve better than what you're getting. The rest is just documentation, investigation, and persistence. You deserve better. Fight for it. The video went viral within hours. Millions of views, thousands of comments, hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories of family financial abuse and asking for resources, advice, and hope. But the message that mattered most came from my mother. Mija, I watched your video. I'm proud of the woman you've become and the work you're doing. I'm sorry it took our family being destroyed for me to learn how to see you clearly. I love you. I called her immediately. Mom, how are you doing? How's the apartment? How's work? Maya, I'm good. Really good. I have a job I like, an apartment I can afford, and for the first time in my adult life, I'm making my own decisions about my own money. Mom, are you happy? Maya, I'm happy in ways I didn't know were possible. I'm happy because I'm finally free to love you kids without having to protect your father from the consequences of his choices. I'm happy because I can be proud of you instead of asking you to minimize your successes to manage his insecurities. Mom, what's the best part of your new life? The best part is that when my children succeed, I get to celebrate with them instead of worrying about how their success will affect someone else's addiction. That night, sitting in my new office, surrounded by case files and testimonials from families who'd escaped financial abuse, I thought about the text message that had started this entire journey. We sold your car. Family comes first. Be grateful we raised you to understand sacrifice. My father had been right about sacrifice, but he'd been wrong about what kind of sacrifice creates strong families. He thought family strength came from family members sacrificing their well-being to enable each other's worst impulses. I'd learned that family strength comes from family members being willing to sacrifice their comfort to protect each other's well-being. He thought family loyalty meant keeping secrets that allowed harm to continue. I'd learned that family loyalty means refusing to keep secrets that enable harm. He thought love meant absorbing other people's consequences indefinitely. I'd learned that love means helping people face consequences that motivate growth and healing. 3 years after that birthday text message changed everything, I finally understood what family really means. Family means people who love you enough to tell you the truth, even when the truth is hard to hear. Family means people who support your growth, even when your growth makes them uncomfortable. Family means people who protect you from harm, even when the harm is coming from within the family itself. And sometimes, fighting for that kind of family means being willing to lose the family you have in order to build the family you deserve. My father will be eligible for parole in 8 years. When that day comes, he'll be 73 years old, and he'll emerge into a world where his entire extended family knows exactly what he's capable of. He'll emerge into a world where his children have built successful, independent lives that don't require his approval or support. He'll emerge into a world where his manipulation tactics are documented, studied, and used to train law enforcement in recognizing family financial abuse. He'll emerge into a world where his crimes have been transformed into other families' protection. That's not the revenge I planned when this all started. When I first found out about my stolen car, I wanted my father to understand how much he'd hurt me. I wanted him to feel guilty. I wanted him to apologize and somehow undo the damage he'd caused. But this is better than the revenge I planned. This is the revenge of transformation. turning his weapons against him by using everything he taught us about manipulation to teach others how to recognize and resist manipulation. This is the revenge of transcendence, building a life so healthy and purpose-driven that his attempts to destroy it only made it stronger. This is the revenge of legacy, ensuring that his crimes become the foundation for other families' freedom. If you've made it this far in my story, if you've stayed with me through all the twists and revelations and legal proceedings, then you understand something important about recovery from family abuse. It's not about getting your old life back. It's about building a new life that's immune to the tactics that destroyed your old one. It's about transforming your knowledge of how you were hurt into wisdom about how others can be protected. It's about realizing that the people who try to make you smaller are actually showing you exactly how big you're capable of becoming. 3 years ago, I was a victim of family financial abuse who thought her only options were to absorb the damage or lose her family. Today, I run a practice that has helped 127 families escape financial abuse. I've testified in 18 criminal cases involving family financial crimes. I've developed training materials that are used by law enforcement agencies across 12 states. Carson runs support groups for family members of addicts and has helped over 200 people understand the difference between loyalty and enablement. Kyle is finishing his degree in social work and plans to specialize in family financial counseling. Jenna has become a financial advisor who specifically helps women recover from financial abuse. Mom volunteers with organizations that support families affected by gambling addiction. Even my grandmother Rosa, at 84 years old, speaks at senior centers about recognizing elder financial abuse. Every single person in my family transformed their experience with victimization into expertise that protects other people from becoming victims. We took the worst thing that ever happened to us and turned it into the best thing we ever did for other people. That's the real victory. Not getting my car back, although that was satisfying. Not seeing my father convicted, although justice mattered. Not even rebuilding my family relationships, although that healing has been profound. The real victory is that my father's attempt to destroy us actually taught us how to save others. So here's my final call to action, and this one isn't about subscribing or sharing, although I hope you'll do both. If you're in a situation where family members are exploiting your loyalty, manipulating your love, isolating you from support, or stealing from you financially, please know that you have more power than you realize. You have the power to stop absorbing other people's consequences. You have the power to break patterns of family dysfunction that may have existed for generations. You have the power to transform your experience with abuse into expertise that protects other people. You have the power to build a family based on healthy love instead of exploitative loyalty. And you have the power to discover that fighting back against people who are hurting you isn't selfish or disloyal. It's necessary for the health of everyone involved. The people who try to convince you that their problems are your responsibility are usually the people whose problems will destroy you if you accept that responsibility. The people who ask you to sacrifice your well-being to protect their comfort are usually the people whose comfort depends on your suffering. The people who tell you that questioning their behavior is betraying the family are usually the people whose behavior is actually betraying the family. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Seek professional help. Build support networks. Set boundaries. Enforce consequences. And remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destruction of themselves and everyone around them. Sometimes the best way to save your family is to be willing to lose it. Sometimes the most powerful revenge against people who exploit your loyalty is to build a life so authentic and healthy that their manipulation tactics no longer work on you. And sometimes discovering that you're strong enough to survive your family's worst dysfunction is the same thing as discovering that you're powerful enough to help other families heal from theirs. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for supporting people who are fighting to escape family financial abuse. Thank you for understanding that recovery isn't just personal, it's political, it's communal, and it's revolutionary. And thank you for reminding me that the worst things that happen to us can become the source of the best things we do for others. Hit subscribe if this story moved you, because there are more stories like this that need to be told. Share this video if you know someone who needs to hear that fighting back against family abuse is possible and necessary. And comment below if you're ready to join a community of people who believe that families should lift each other up, not tear each other down. Your family's dysfunction doesn't have to be your life sentence. Your parents' choices don't have to determine your future. Your siblings' loyalty to toxic people doesn't have to define your boundaries. You have the power to build something better. And when you do, you'll discover that the life you build in spite of your family's dysfunction is often more beautiful and meaningful than the life you could have built with their support. That's the ultimate revenge, becoming so authentically yourself that the people who tried to diminish you become irrelevant to your happiness. Fight back. It's worth it. Trust me, I know.